Did our primate ancestors ingest psilocybin mushrooms in our distant past? And did this play a role in our consciousness and becoming more expanded in our awareness, our forms of language, and so forth? This is something that has come to be known as the stoned ape theory. And this theory originated from funny enough, right? Uh, Originated from a lecturer, this kind of countercultural figure named Terence McKenna. And this is Terence McKenna. If you're not familiar with him, I definitely recommend you listen to his talks. And one of the best places to go for this is a podcast called Psychedelic Salon. And as you can see, they're up to 700 episodes. They've been running for the last 15 years or so. And basically, most of their podcasts are an archive of Terence McKenna's lectures. And what he basically did was he kind of came of age in the 60s, 70s, and then by the 80s and 90s, he was going around the country and giving lectures. And he would just talk about psychedelics. And he was kind of like a psychedelic pioneer. He was taking them and basically from a standpoint of a scientist, botanist, anthropologist, psychology, and trying to figure out like what exactly was going on and how could this help us in our quest to get a grasp on our reality. So look, I'll let you go listen to Terence yourself. Personally, I stumbled upon him in earlier times by a random friend who was like, hey, go check this guy out. And when I first started listening to him, his voice really is kind of a little bit maybe off-putting at first to some. It was to me, and I didn't really want to keep listening. But then you start to hear what he says, and it's just fascinating mind. I mean, I really do think he was one of these kind of enigma personalities. I don't think there's been anyone quite like him since. And why does he matter, right? Well, I think because he was pushing the boundaries of knowledge, pushing the boundaries of our process of unfolding our reality. And he had a gift in the way that he spoke and speculated about things. And he also put himself out there. And rather than being like an armchair commentator, he actually took high doses of mushrooms and other plant substances and reported back on his experiences. So, this gets us into the stoned ape theory. And basically, to put it very succinctly, his stoned ape theory was that, as consensus evolutionary theory goes, the idea is that apes who are clearly, very similar to us. I think wherever you stand on the where did humans come from uh, spectrum, right? Look at apes, monkeys, and look at us. I mean, the physical similarity is so apparent. So whatever you believe about what that connection is, we can agree, I think, that the connection is there. Okay. And so the idea is that the apes, when the forests when the climate changed, that they started moving from the forests and the treetops out into the open plains. And this may have been part of the reason why they started walking upright to see more. And also, where Terence takes this is that they would have started to follow the cattle, which we know through archaeology and paleontology and so forth that human tribes did follow game. They followed the animals, right, as a food source, and also the animals' own, intuitive sense of where to go to keep finding water and food and surviving. So, on this, right, if you didn't know, psilocybin mushrooms, right, magic mushrooms, actually grow naturally on cow poop, cow dung. Yeah, that's crazy. And so Terence's theory was, okay, well, we know that psilocybin mushrooms grow on cow dung. Our ancient ancestors were following them around and probably likely saw these mushrooms, and they were kind of ingesting whatever they saw, and then they would have ingested this and kind of had like a morphology or a like a branch of evolution into the consciousness through regular ingestion of these mushrooms over a longer period of time. And Terence was just winging this, from his own speculations. Uh, and what we're going to look at here is that Popular Mechanics actually just recently released an article about a scientific study that was published in just last month that is actually apparently confirming that Terence McKenna's, you know, stoned ape theory is actually true to some extent. So it's pretty fascinating. And from my perspective, it's just interesting to see, someone who's just out there speculating about human evolutions and psychedelics, and then boom, now science is starting to confirm it. So let's take a moment here to just get a visual. This is Terence. Now, Terence passed away in just before or about on the year 2000. I forget the exact year, but he passed away. His brother, Dennis, who worked with him closely, still is alive and goes on podcasts from time to time. This is a short clip of him talking about the stoned ape theory.
It's not so simple to say that they ate psilocybin mushrooms and suddenly the brain mutated. I think it's more complex than that. But I think it was a factor. It was like a software to program this neurologically modern hardware to think, to have cognition, to have language, because language is essentially synesthesia. Language is an association with inherently meaningless sound, except that it's associated with a complex of meaning.
So, yeah, I mean, I've always found it an interesting theory because, if you have ever had an experience with psilocybin mushrooms, then you would have probably noted this expanded amount of perception. For example, I remember, looking at like a lamp and the light, right? And I could just see like the prism of the light in a way I normally would never see it. It wasn't like I was hallucinating or something. It was just I could see like the structure of the light beam from the lamp, almost like another dimension of it. And that in normal eyesight and normal day to day, I just can't see that. This is something that Huxley, for example, called the reducing valve, right? That day to day, our body, our brain is programmed in a way for survival. So we filter out a lot of detail that we don't need, because otherwise, maybe we would be standing there looking at the tree just like mesmerized, right? And then we're going to get killed. So it's like not a survivally, it's not an advantageous for survival to be having this increased perception. All right. So, and then plus there's just so much more, right? I would be speaking for the next hour to share all the insights potentially from, responsibly, safely used psychedelic plant substances for, personal growth, spiritual growth, whatever you want to call it. But there's so much more than that. You realize when you have this psilocybin experience, there is an expansion of your consciousness and almost like a deeper understanding of so much more, right? And I get all your cliches about, yeah, it's all one, we're all connected, all of this kind of stuff, and much deeper and intricate stuff as well. You have to experience it if you haven't. But my point is that, and then we're coming from a baseline of like where we already are, right? We already have language, like Dennis said. We already have, complex systems and technology and a thinking mind. So imagine, 300,000 years ago or millions of years ago, you have this kind of very primitive human that is almost like barely conscious, if we can just imagine this, like where they understand basic things, and maybe like how it's kind of portrayed in movies and documentaries, like it's grunting and pointing, you know, there's not really much. And language is one of the great mysteries of our evolution. You know, you take a moment to think about language, like it's crazy. You know, it's wild. Language is so abstract. Like, how did we come up with it? So I think I've always thought with the stoned ape theory that it's very plausible that you could have this very primitive being with the capability, like Dennis said, the hardwiring to have a more expanded awareness and consciousness and language and so forth, and taking these plants and having those experiences, going, whoa, like maybe for the first time going, huh, where are we? Like I'm like a thing with hands, and what's going on here? And then figuring out like, oh, we can like create certain sounds that we agree to like call things, and then we can communicate better, you know. And who knows what other kind of things were figured out from this heightened awareness and problem solving, which, by the way, you don't need to just take my own personal anecdotes. There's a bunch of studies that were done in the 50s and continue to be done about how psilocybin and other psychedelic plant substances do help with things like problem solving. I recall one of them, which you can read about in Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, is, you know, they put a group of academics and scientists, and they had to all figure out a problem. And the ones that had the psychedelics thought of more, you know, creative and kind of breakthrough, innovative ideas. So I think this all makes sense. Now, does this explain how we got how we are today? No, I don't think so. But I think the real thing here, right, which we'll end this on, is just the fact that an idea like this, right, which some might find compelling, but many would probably find as crazy, right? Now in Popular Mechanics, it's like an establishment scientific periodical. You know, here we are. Magic mushrooms may have shaped our consciousness. July, you know, just a week ago, and yeah, I wonder how Terence would be feeling about this now. And you can, you know, read this at your own leisure, but basically, you know, again, yeah, published last month, scientific study from Argentina, and that, you know, psilocybin not only influenced individual perceptions while under its effects, but shaped human consciousness as a whole over thousands of generations. Pretty interesting, right? Psilocybin enhances cognitive functioning. You know, from an evolutionary perspective, it's proposed that the ingestion of psilocybin could have contributed to the improvement in visual abilities and the reproductive success of communities made use of these mushrooms. And, you know, basically they're just saying that they have found scientific evidence that this is possible. And through, you know, figuring out that, yes, these mushrooms would have been available to these early human ancestors, and yes, they would have eaten them. And, you know, where's the further evidence? Well, you can go from there. You can consult this. You can read the study here and see. And also, you know, there were part of Terence's argument, right, or evidence in his book called Food of the Gods, where he puts this out, his argument out there. I recall his part of his evidence was that there were cave paintings from the earliest civilizations, actually some in Turkey. And basically that was, you know, one of his primary pieces of evidence that they were using these, because this, for example, was painted in the caves, in Algerian caves 9,000 years ago. And yeah, I mean, given the connection to like a shamanistic context, I mean, yeah, do you think that this was just someone having fun painting this, or do you think that this was a reference to, you know, the effects that would have been felt from the mushrooms on these early people? I mean, look, there's a lot of interesting imagery here. And of course, you know, these cave paintings type of thing, just like with the gray aliens and all that, is it's never like hard evidence, right? Because you can always say we don't know what these people were thinking when they made these cave paintings. And it's true, but it's suggestive. It contributes to a body of evidence as we start to as we continue to kind of explore these avenues. But yeah, I think the real thing from this is that some, theory by someone, that most would kind of roll their eyes at. Here we are 30 years later, and popular mechanics is confirming that it's a real scientific plausibility. So pretty interesting. Let me know what you think, and I'll include some of the links to this information here in the description below. Thank you for watching Expanded Knowledge. My name's Anthony, and I'll see you in the next one.